What happened yesterday on Gorman was unprovoked genocide.
The United States of America is finally running out of ways to sell genocide to the world. Christian Zionism will be indicted because people will associate it with fake American Christianity. Russia and China could have done something about this genocide, but chose not to. China could have at least sanctioned Israel, but didn't. Christian nationalism was being used in the Canadian Conservative Party, but lost the last federal election because of it. Now there's a struggle to force them out as the prevailing ideology. Now Danielle Smith is the reason why a lot of conservatives want to push them out. Who is Danielle Smith? She's the Premier of Alberta who wants to separate and create a white nationalist state against First Nations treaties. We should not condemn all the younger Jews. Should we condemn them to wish to ally with Hamas against the Israeli Zionist state? No, we should support them. Do you know what I hate? I hate how my association with Comrade Net is treated with such hate, such bigotry, and unjustified opportunism. You, who hate Net, you hate him because he represents the ideas of Gen Z and Gen A Jews. He is 40 now and still opposing the Zionist state of Israel. What many refuse to see is that Comrade Net knew that this is what Zionism was always going to do to Palestinians. Where other anti-Zionist Jews refuse to compare the Zionists to Nazis, Comrade Net was always making this comparison. Not just that, but Comrade Net predicted a Palestinian Holocaust as far back as 2015.
Hello, this is Comrade Net. First of all, in respect to Jason Unruh, I disagree with him. When the United States of America finally cuts off all support for the State of Israel, it will not be Christian Zionism and Christian nationalism which gets blamed for this ongoing Palestinian Holocaust that we're seeing right now. The United States of America, to save face, will say that Judaism itself tricked them into doing this. And this is because Americanism will not go down with Zionism. I mean, it will go down, but it will not go down with Zionism if it can avoid that. Now, the last country to support the State of Israel will clearly be the United States of America. But once it finally cuts ties with the State of Israel, I just don't see this notion that Jason has that the actual culprits that have been behind all of this will actually be brought to justice. No, it is so much more easier for the United States of America to blame this all on Judaism than to fess up with the fact that settler colonial projects are to blame for this. Now, contrary to popular belief, I don't control Jason Unruh. I showed him many things that he could not ignore, things that other people are jealous of that they wish I would have showed them, but Jason Unruh managed to cultivate a level of trust that remains very rare. And I cultivated a level of trust with him because I showed him literally everything. What I didn't show others, I showed to Jason. And some of it I've shown to some others, but, you know, like, a lot of times you have to be patient enough to let me show you out in the open what's going on. I don't control what happens in Maricopa County, but yet people think some people expect me to somehow. I can't control who is willing to talk up front, who is willing to be recorded, and who is not willing to be recorded. And this is on other people's individual autonomy. But I don't control Jason Unruh. I showed him things that he could not ignore. It is known that I helped Jason Unruh overcome smear campaigns against him. This is not some conspiracy. The fact is there was a collaborated effort by white millennials in the 2010s to defame Jason Unruh, to take advantage of the fact that he clearly didn't fully understand the gender thing. In fact, it's known that Jason asked questions, which is the standard. You ask questions if you don't know that stuff, and they use this as a way to say that he was transphobic. I remember all this shit. You know, and while people say that there's no such thing as an SJW, I remember the Social Justice Warriors website. Jason Unruh is not the only one that remembers that. It's also white millennials that seem to have really instated call-out culture, otherwise known as cancel culture, which since 2020 has pretty much been something masses of people have been disillusioned by. 2020 ripped off the mask from a lot of things. A further ripping off the mask was October 7th, 2023, showing that there is no such thing as a good Zionist. Now, while what Hamas did could be considered terrorism, even by me it's considered terrorism, one must understand this. You don't have to support terrorism to understand why someone is a terrorist. Terrorism is a worthless tactic, in my opinion. It always backfires. But terrorism is the tactic of the desperate. And a terrorist is someone who specializes in terrorism. And terrorism is a tactic. And doing one or two actions of terrorism doesn't actually qualify you as a terrorist. If you want to know about a real terrorist organization, look up the Weather Underground. And I've said this before, and other Bundists have said it. Isn't it interesting that Bill Ayers, a terrorist from the Weather Underground, supports gun control? And yes, there are correlations between gun control and the terrorists, the actual terrorists. The terrorists should be seen in the vein as groups like the Weather Underground, as I said before. And if you don't know what the Weather Underground is, that's not my fault. But Jason Unruh is, he's hated. He's hated because he is for real. This gets in the way of the clout chasers on YouTube claiming to be communists and anarchists. Jason Unruh is hated because he is not compliant with First Worldism. First Worldism is anti-Third World. First Worldism is a disconnection from non-First Worlder experiences. Jason Unruh's more global view, as opposed to a First World privilege point of view, has consistently got him in trouble with fake communists and fake anarchists who don't like the idea of genuine resistance journalism in the First World. People who are this way show themselves to be who they are. And isn't it interesting that so many of the white millennials in the 2010s have now been over time ousted as far-righters or liberals in disguise, still far-righters, regardless. And yes, I would say that radical liberalism is far-right, not center-right. Radical liberalism is not even social fascism. Social democracy isn't actually social fascism either. Social fascism is what happens to social democracy when it inevitably declines. That's why throughout Europe there's a whole bunch of populist social fascism right now, because the social democracy actually is in decline over there. Not as bad as in the UK. And of course in the United States of America we never had social democracy. We had a welfare system, which was a joke, but we never had social democracy, and that's a good thing. Social democracy is the primary way to stop revolution from ever happening. This notion of harm reduction makes no sense, because if people in the United States were talking about that, why are people in the United States who talk about harm reduction always talking about healthcare, but never getting rid of the Department of Homeland Security? Real Jews can only be understood as the Torah nation or diaspora Judea. I have in my notes somewhere how to say diaspora Judea in Hebrew, and believe me when I say diaspora and exile are two different words in Hebrew. Just as real Christians have catechism, the Torah nation has the Talmud. Just as real Muslims have the Hadith, diaspora Judea has the Talmud. And by the way, the Talmud is the highest law of the Jews. It's even more high of a law than even the 613 mitzvot. The highest law of the Jews is something called the Sholosh Shavuot, or 3 Oaths, which is in the Babylonian Talmud. Now there's two Talmuds. The Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud, otherwise known as the Talmud Bavli and the Talmud Yerushalmi. The primary one that Jewish people use is the Talmud Bavli. Why? Because that's the Talmud of the diaspora. It's not pro-Babylonian. If you want to know how to tell when someone actually hates Jewish people, it has nothing to do with animosity to Israel. If they think the Talmud is pedophilia, if they think the Talmud is evil or racist or any of these things, that is the sign of an actual anti-Semite. Because Talmud is connected to Torah the same way Hadith is connected to Quran and Catechism is connected to a Christian Bible. Zionism is not political Judaism. Bundism is political Judaism. Real Christians believe in Mother Mary and the 12 apostles, along with the canonized saints of Christianity. Christianity void of Mother Mary, without Mother Mary, exposes itself as misogyny and male global domination. Now, I understand that these may be hot takes for people, and I don't give two shits. The aim is to be factual here, not to placate to anyone. Now, I know there's been some confusion because I'm supportive of Jason and people Jason is around, but I'll give you an example of an actual thing that you probably don't know. while me and Luke Dublin align on a lot of things, especially on how we've helped pop up Jason Unruh more and more, one of the big differences is that Luke Dublin thinks that the side of Jason's audience that genuinely supports him is the real audience. I disagree with Luke Dublin. I think the majority of Jason's audience is actually his enemies, which is why I hate most of you. Almost all of you are keyboard warriors. Almost all of you are pretenders. None of you understand the significance of Dr. Weisfeld, which is why you can fuck off. And yes, his takes on Syria are shit, and I will deal with that. But you don't even know his takes on Syria. I would say they're shit, but even you don't. I know what those shit takes are. You don't. You assume too much. So, I am doubling down on my support of Jason Unruh. Since a certain tragedy happened to me in 2019, I was not able to go around and walk around as much where the places I'd like to go for a long time. And in that isolation, the only person I could talk to was Jason Unruh. And I would go to places, dangerous places, and introduce Jason to people that other people have been trying to want to meet. But Jason was the only one that got the direct, Jason Unruh's. I've read this stuff out and I'm so frustrated and nervous, but what I'm saying is Jason Unruh has actually talked to the people face to face through a phone. Like I'm showing this to you through a phone, not through my camera. My camera phone. I have an actual camera, which I am starting to utilize. But Jason actually, there were some others. Luke has met some of these people. Dark Stovey has met some of these people. Actually, funny enough, Red Pagan Nicole has met some of these people that Jason has not met. But Jason met most of these people that that I've been in contact with since that time. Of course, the Arizona Rebellion no longer exists. Neither does the LA Underground. The Commune of Anarchy still does, but the federated anarchist structures out here have pretty much fallen apart due to lack of solidarity, not to lack of commitment. And majority of the Demarchists are huddling around Comrade Number 3 on the Navajo Reservation and on other reservations that other leaders of the Demarchists are located. And I will not give specifics of any kind. But yeah, I appreciate the solidarity with Jason Unruh. I hope everybody's going to enjoy this series that we're doing together. Sorry if I had problems writing, and from what I understand, Jason's having a hard time reading what he wrote down because we're all frustrated. Our particular focus would be the removal of the State of Israel from existence. Now, before anybody calls that utopian, let's get one thing straight. The State of Israel exists on life support from Western nations. You cut off that life support, and the whole problem can be dealt with. It is not utopian to talk about Palestinian liberation. The State of Israel has no right to exist on Torah grounds or secular grounds. Period. Now, there is a problem of these new Hebrews that popped up, but they should be given collective re-education. The Palestinians, on the other hand, just need liberation, and that includes Palestinian diaspora. This obsession with the nation state is part of the problem Marxists have. Now, there are Marxists that reject the nation state. But those of you who do, you're in the minority. Sorry, but you are. And I don't have time for fucking LARPers. I am concerning myself with the fact that the actual true Jewish nation, which is a diaspora nation and always has been, and this should be evident if you read the books of Moses, which never see the Jewish people into the Holy Land. We've always been a diaspora nation. Eretz Yisrael, or Land of Israel, is wherever Jewish people develop large community. That place they call the Land of Israel, or Eretz Yisrael, is not Eretz Yisrael or the Land of Israel. It's actually called. So here's the thing: the actual Hebrew word for Palestine is not Eretz Yisrael. Again, Eretz Yisrael is wherever the Jewish people are. Actually, the actual Hebrew word for Palestine, it's Kodesh HaEretz, or the Holy Land. It just so happens that when the Jewish people were the custodians of the Holy Land, it was at that time Land of Israel. So Kodesh HaEretz, as we used to be the custodians of Kodesh HaEretz at that time was Eretz Yisrael because of Am Yisrael. Back to you, Jason.
Judaism, by its very essence, rejects the state of Israel and the ideology of Zionism. So Comrade Net is being truthful. Zionism cannot even be called political Judaism. Yes, he's right. Bundism is actually political Judaism. Joseph Stalin supported the creation of the State of Israel, but the Jewish Labor Bund rejected it. Only a left opportunist would say otherwise. No excuses about needing to deter British control over Palestine can be taken seriously. Refusing to see how the Bund has evolved today exposes Judeo-phobic anti-Semitism. Today, there are a lot of Bundists who recognize the heroics of the old Bolsheviks, and there are communists who recognize the historic significance of the old Jewish Labor Bund. I will leave 3 links in the description. The first will take you to the Al Jazeera program, which will play next. And the second will take you to a stream Comrade Net and I did after Sabbath that had ended. And the third will bring you to a musical remix by Comrade Net, which is culturally relevant to everyone. Now I will turn it over to the Al Jazeera program called The Take. This video came out on YouTube on the exact date of the 27th of May, 2025.
Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, humanitarian aid in Gaza hanging by a thread.
The Israeli and U.S.-backed so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation would essentially take aid distribution away from the United Nations and put it in the hands of private contractors.
Can an aid initiative backed by militaries and rejected by humanitarians truly help Gaza? I'm Manuel Rapalo, and this is The Take.
My name's Ali Harb. I am a journalist for Al Jazeera English, based here in Washington, D.C., where I cover U.S. politics and foreign policy.
So, Ali, welcome to The Take. The latest news that we're hearing is that Hamas has agreed to a proposal by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff for a Gaza ceasefire. We've heard this type of news before. This is exactly the type of thing that gets a lot of people feeling hopeful. Is this time different?
One can only hope, but only time will tell. As you mentioned, we heard this early in May of last year when Hamas agreed to a proposal put forward by Qatar and Egypt. We heard this again late in May of last year when then President Joe Biden announced that ceasefire proposal that with the guidelines that seemed agreeable to all sides. They never materialized. We heard this again earlier this year, and a ceasefire was put in place, but then it was broken by Israel. As of right now, the details are scant. We really don't know what this proposal entails. So cautious optimism is there, but we don't know where it's going to lead and how it's going to play out. We know the Israelis have not agreed to it publicly. But I'll say one thing, that this horrific war that's ongoing, only one person can stop it, and that's Benjamin Netanyahu. And for Netanyahu to stop this war, he needs to feel the heat and the pressure from the United States, which is Israel's top military aid donor, and which gives Israel all the spare parts and diplomatic and political backing to carry out this war. So how this ceasefire proposal will play out will depend on the Trump administration's willingness to pressure Netanyahu to take it, and not just take it in the way that he did earlier this year, but to take it and stick to it.
Ali, on Sunday evening, I went to bed after seeing images on social media of charred bodies after Israeli forces bombed a school-turned-shelter.
The overnight bombardment sparked fires in the classrooms where forcibly displaced Palestinians were sleeping. Civil defense have been pulling out charred bodies.
The humanitarian crisis is deepening, including 500,000 people being starved. There's a lot to unpack here when it comes to the humanitarian situation, but now there's this new plan for delivering aid in Gaza that critics are saying could, quote, militarize humanitarian aid. What does that mean?
So, since the beginning of the war, the humanitarian aid to Gaza has been delivered through the United Nations and its local partners on the ground, meaning United Nations agencies, be it the World Food Program or UNRWA, bring in the aid, they distribute it to local NGOs, to local bakeries. Another agency that gets left out is the World Health Organization, because this aid includes medical supply and it gets to the hospitals through the World Health Organization. The Israelis are trying to revamp that entire system and put the aid in the hands of an American company, or allegedly an American company. We really don't know who will operate this company and how it will operate. We know that from public reporting, and we know from previous Israeli comments that this is an Israeli idea, right? So the origins are Israeli, but it's being presented as an American company that will deliver aid in specific areas. So people will have to go to those zones.
And before we get into all that, we should note that the name of this organization is called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. If you've never heard that term before, I'm speaking to the viewers, you're not alone. Ali, what do we know? Because from what I can tell, there's a lack of information out there about this organization. Not a whole lot that we know about the background of the people who are running it. What can you tell us about that?
So we know very little, and that itself means we know a lot. We know that it's opaque. We know that it's not transparent. And we know that the humanitarian community as a whole, the United Nations, its agencies, the NGOs working on the ground, are being asked to trust this unknown, newly formed entity. Just trust the plan. But there's very little about it out there. We know that it is registered in Geneva. We know that the person who was in charge of it, supposedly, and who was going around talking it up to media outlets, has stepped down.
The executive director of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, tasked with leading new aid distribution efforts, has resigned with immediate effect. Jake Woods' resignation comes just 2 months after he was asked to lead the organization.
Beyond that, there hasn't been a lot of details to allay some of the concerns that have been voiced about the militarization of aid, about using aid to displace civilians. So again, everybody's being told, just trust this entity that nobody knows anything about.
Ali, I want to ask you about not the objectives of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, but how exactly we might expect it to operate. Like, what would that look like in practice?
According to the reporting that's out there, the foundation will set up a few distribution centers in the south of the Gaza Strip. And people will have to physically walk on foot, because there are hardly any vehicles left in Gaza, to these distribution centers. Now, how they will receive the aid is not clear, but there is reporting out there that they will have their biometrics taken, including facial recognition technology, where they will receive aid. We don't know how much aid they will be receiving. And it's not clear if they will be able to return to the north, if they've come from the north of Gaza to the south of Gaza to this distribution center, or if they will have to stay in the north. We've seen ideas that there would be sort of temporary settlements set up next to these distribution centers. And a big concern, especially with the use of biometrics, is that all of this information will be fed back to the Israeli military, knowing the close ties between this foundation and the Israeli military in Israel. It was envisioned by Israel. And 2, that they take your biometrics, and the American guard or the multinational guard who's in there, we don't know what nationality of these people will say, oh, we have a record that you were, for example, you served in a health ministry, which is quote unquote run by Hamas. Therefore, you're not going to receive aid. Even worse, we're going to tell the Israelis to come and drone you on your way back. So there are all these serious concerns about how this will run.
And I want to get into those criticisms here coming up, but what we do know is that when it comes to the delivery of humanitarian aid in Gaza, it has been up to the United Nations to carry out that work. How does this new plan either keep the UN involved or change the role of the United Nations in Gaza? And why does that matter?
It matters a lot because the United Nations humanitarian missions are driven by a few principles: humanity, neutrality, impartiality, independence. So humanitarian aid must be delivered without any preference for political affiliations, for religion, for the people receiving it, other than need. If you need aid, you get aid. When you sideline the United Nations, you could easily get around those principles, and you can weaponize aid more than it is already weaponized, not just in how much aid you allow into Gaza, which Israel has been using this opening the tap a little bit, closing it a little bit to advance its political and military aims. Now you're controlling how it's distributed and therefore who receives it. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has said that it's open to working with the humanitarian partners, that it wants to work with them. But that begs the question, why do you want to work with them when there's already a system in place? Now, the humanitarian actors have said, we will not give cover to something that could be so nefarious.
That was going to be my next question for you, because it's my understanding that the UN itself has said that they don't want to participate in this. I believe there's even been criticism from within the Israeli government criticizing the feasibility and workability of this plan. If there's so much pushback, even internally in Israel, how sustainable is this plan really?
We still don't know how much Israel's committed to it, right? We've seen previous mechanisms for delivering aid outside of the normal, get the aid through the land crossings to those who know how to distribute them. We've seen alternatives, right? Like the airdrops. That didn't work out. They were dropping on people's heads and killing them, and you couldn't do airdrops in sufficient quantities. We saw the American pier. Do you remember the American pier? That was a farce. They tried to build a pier to get food and medical supplies through the sea instead of telling their Israeli allies just let them through the land crossings. That failed, and the pier cost $300 million, give or take, and drifted into the Oceanian Sea, that is. It's not certain that this will work, but if Israel is committed to politicizing the aid and continuing the policy of starvation while delivering basic, and this is not my word, this is the word of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, basic food supplies to Gaza to keep its allies at bay, we could see a scenario where this whole endeavor is not really working in feeding the people of Gaza or in delivering humanitarian aid, but that it would be pushed as, to quote UN officials, fig leaf for the policy of starvation. It's important to note that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense minister, Yoav Gallant, are wanted by the International Criminal Court for suspected war crimes. And the main crime is using starvation as a weapon of war. So this isn't academic. There are legal indictments. The Israeli Prime Minister is a fugitive from international justice for using starvation as a weapon of war. And this is a continuation of that.
More with Ali after the break. So, Ali, supporters of this plan, talking about Israel and the United States, say that the plan ensures that humanitarian aid doesn't end up in the hands of Hamas, echoing this claim that aid is often stolen or diverted by Hamas. Is there any evidence to support these claims?
No. And this is not me saying this. This is the head of the World Food Program, who is the widow of former Senator John McCain, who was one of the most vocal supporters of Israel in the United States. Cindy McCain has said that there's no evidence of Hamas looting or taking or stealing the aid or diverting the aid.
Israel has consistently said that the looting is being carried out by Hamas. Have you seen evidence that it is Hamas stealing the food?
No, not at all. Not in this round. Listen, these people are desperate, and they see a World Food Program truck coming in, and they run for it. This doesn't have anything to do with Hamas or any kind of organized crime or anything. It has simply to do with the fact these people are starving to death.
We've heard US officials say over the past year that there isn't evidence to back this claim. We've heard multiple UN officials say there's no evidence. And if the Israelis have evidence, they have not shown it to us. So it's really curious, basing this whole endeavor, this whole initiative of destroying and tearing apart the humanitarian system in Gaza based on a claim that there is no evidence to back it, which is why so many humanitarian officials are skeptical. And again, this is being led by a prime minister who's wanted by the International Criminal Court for using starvation as a weapon of war. So an objective observer may look at this and say, there's more evidence that this is being used to use starvation as an evidence of war than it is to thwart the alleged looting or stealing or diverting by Hamas. And if anything, humanitarian trucks have been looted by criminal gangs in Gaza, and there have been UN reports, there have been reports in the US media of criminal gangs operating almost freely in areas that are controlled by the Israeli military. And they've been attacked or looted by desperate people who are thirsty and hungry. So the convoys going by and people stop it and take it from it. And the issue here is that Israel has been systemically killing police officers and guards who are securing the aid and openly brag about it. They say these are Hamas members because Israel has come to treat the civil state in Gaza, everything that is related to the governance of Gaza, as Hamas and therefore a legitimate target. And this feeds into diverting the aid into a new mechanism to dismantle any semblance of autonomy that Palestinians have. Because even though the United Nations is delivering the aid, on the ground, it's through local Palestinians, and they don't want any Palestinian involvement. They want to strip what remains of Palestinian autonomy and what remains of Palestinian governance in the Gaza Strip.
Palestinians in Gaza are desperate for aid, but we have heard from some Palestinian officials who say that this new plan is an effort to, quote, corral the Palestinian population. Can you explain what they mean by that?
Yeah, so there's a Wall Street Journal report from June of 2024 that talks of an Israeli proposal to turn Gaza into humanitarian bubbles, or what Netanyahu called sterile zones. Sterile, think of the word sterile, no life, internment camps basically, where people have to be by this aid distribution center that are guarded and overseen by the Americans, and that would be the only place in Gaza where they would get basic food supplies. So there are major concerns that this is at its core a displacement initiative. You lure people by food into an internment camp, and then subsequently you say, okay, we struck a deal with country X that will accept you if you want to leave, because this is the only way you could live in Gaza, and it would be presented as voluntary migration, having destroyed the whole of the Gaza Strip, having destroyed any element of life in it, and having even diverted humanitarian aid and made it so little and so confined to certain geographical area that the only choice you would have is to leave the Gaza Strip, which is Trump's plan, right? Depopulating and owning Gaza. So there are concerns that this is a vehicle for internal displacement, if not ethnic cleansing of Gaza's population.
I mean, the scenario that you're painting is very bleak, but it's one that we've heard from analysts many times before, this idea that the ultimate plan is the forced displacement of people, the ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip. Finally, Ali, do you see a scenario where the project that's being proposed right now, this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, instead of alleviating the crisis, will only deepen the humanitarian crisis?
Oh, absolutely. That's not just a scenario. That's the only scenario. We know the people behind it are the Israeli government. we know what the Israeli government wants to achieve. Like that's the thing. It's not like Israel's hiding its motives. It's not like Israel is trying to tell us we want to feed the people of Gaza and give them aid and let them live in peace. No, Benjamin Netanyahu is on the record saying in last week, we want to create sterile zones, move people there. And he's on the record as saying that the only ceasefire he would agree to is one that would disarm Hamas and eliminate Hamas. But the third part is implementing Trump's plan, the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. These are their aims, and they're telling us this is what they want to achieve, and this is one of their projects. So one can only assume that this project is set up to help their stated aims and their stated goals.
Ali, I think obviously the ideal scenario would be for this war to end, for a ceasefire to happen and to be made permanent. But right now, in the immediate term, to get aid to Palestinians in Gaza who desperately need it, what alternative is there that could ensure both security and dignity in the aid that's being delivered?
Well, as you said, a ceasefire would be the best way forward, because there are a number of challenges that are related not just to the amount of aid that's entering Gaza, but the security of those trucks, because they've been targeted by Israel. The people guarding the trucks have also been targeted by Israel's. Bakeries, shelters, hospitals have been targeted by Israel. So a ceasefire would be the first step. But absent a ceasefire, just basic proposal: flood Gaza with aid. Flood Gaza with, instead of 50 trucks, 500 trucks. Instead of 500 trucks, 800 trucks. And make sure that there's so much food and medical supplies that even if some gets looted, that even if there are issues with distribution, there's enough aid for everyone. But as we know, Israel has done the opposite of that, which is prevent any aid from entering, and then under immense international pressure, only allow a little bit of aid, what many people have described as a drop in the ocean.
Ali, thank you for joining us today on The Take.
Thank you for having me.
And that's The Take. We're always listening to what you think of the show. Let us know what kind of episodes you'd like to hear more of and what you thought of this one. And if you want to catch more episodes like this, make sure you're following our YouTube playlist. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button so you stay in the loop with all things Al Jazeera English. We'll be back tomorrow.